Lyra didn't know that the stranger watching her gather herbs at the forest boundary was the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories. She didn't know he'd been searching for his fated mate for decades, and she certainly didn't know that the moment his eyes found hers across the moonlit clearing, her life of hiding was about to end forever. The memory of her public rejection still burned like acid in her chest. 3 months had passed since Marcus had torn her heart out in front of his entire pack, declaring her too weak for an alpha's mate just moments before their bonding ceremony was to begin. The humiliation had been complete, devastating. She could still hear the collective gasp of the witnesses, still feel the weight of their pitying stares. Now she survived on the edges of pack territories, packless and forgotten. The borrowed clothes hung loose on her frame, a constant reminder that nothing in her life truly belonged to her anymore. She gathered medicinal herbs in the darkness, trading them for temporary shelter when the weather turned cruel. Sleep came in fits and starts, her wolf instincts never allowing her to fully rest. She'd forgotten what safety felt like. The moonwort was particularly potent tonight, its silver leaves glowing in the pale light filtering through the canopy. Lyra's fingers worked quickly, efficiently, filling her worn canvas bag with the precious herbs. Every sound made her freeze, every shadow could hide danger. Rogues prowled these borderlands, and a lone female wolf was easy prey. A twig snapped behind her. Lyra spun, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 male wolves emerged from the tree line, their scents acrid with aggression and hunger. Rogues. Her blood went cold. "Well, well," the largest one drawled, his eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "What do we have here? A little packless bitch all alone?" "I don't want trouble," Lyra whispered, backing toward the deeper forest. Her wolf whined in terror, recognizing the predatory energy radiating from the males. "Too bad," another rogue laughed, circling to cut off her escape route. "We've been tracking your scent for days. You smell available." The word landed like a physical blow. Available. That's what she was now, wasn't she? No pack protection, no mate's claim, no one who would even notice if she disappeared. "Please," she breathed, clutching her herb bag like a shield. That's when he stepped from the shadows. The temperature in the clearing seemed to drop 10 degrees. Power rolled off the newcomer in waves so intense that even the rogue stumbled backward. He was tall, broader than any wolf Lyra had ever seen, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to catch and hold the moonlight. When he moved, it was with the fluid grace of absolute confidence. "You will leave," he said quietly. His voice was velvet over steel, carrying an authority that made Lyra's bones ache with recognition. "Now!" The lead rogue snarled, but uncertainty flickered across his features. "This doesn't concern you, stranger. The female is unclaimed." "Is she?" The stranger's gaze found Lyra's across the clearing, and something impossible happened. Heat shot up her arm, spreading through her chest, settling somewhere behind her sternum like a second heartbeat. A golden thread seemed to unfurl between them, warm and electric and utterly bewildering. Her breath caught. What was happening to her? The stranger's eyes never left hers as he spoke again. "I suggest you reconsider your position." The rogues must have finally recognized what they were facing. The largest one took another step back, his bravado crumbling. We didn't know she was yours." "You know now." They fled. Lyra stood frozen in the sudden silence, her entire body trembling with adrenaline and something else she couldn't name. The golden warmth in her chest pulsed gently, like a beacon calling her home to a place she'd never been. The stranger approached slowly, his hands visible and empty. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. His scent wrapped around her like a blanket, pine and rain, and something uniquely him that made her wolf purr for the first time in months. "What's your name?" His voice was gentler now, careful. "Lyra," she whispered. "Lyra." The way he said it made it sound like something precious. You're safe now. Safe. The word felt foreign, impossible. She hadn't been safe in so long, she'd forgotten what it meant. Who are you? He hesitated for just a moment. Someone who won't hurt you. That wasn't an answer, but something in his eyes made her believe it anyway. The golden thread between them hummed with truth. I should go, she said, even as every instinct screamed at her to move closer to him. Where? The simple question shattered her. Where could she go? She had nowhere, no one, nothing except the clothes on her back and a bag of herbs that might buy her another night's shelter. I don't know, she admitted, the words scraping her throat raw. Come with me. Every survival instinct she'd developed screamed at her to run. Strange males meant danger, meant betrayal, meant the kind of pain she was still trying to heal from. But the golden warmth in her chest disagreed, pulling her toward him like gravity. I can't, she whispered. You can. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his dark eyes. I have a place where you'd be safe. Food, shelter, protection. No strings, no expectations. Just safety while you figure out what you want to do next. Why? The question burst from her before she could stop it. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like wonder. I know enough. The golden thread pulled tighter, and for the first time since Marcus had destroyed her world, Lyra felt something other than fear. Hope, tiny and fragile, but real. Okay, she breathed, the word barely audible. His relief was palpable. Okay. As they walked deeper into the forest toward whatever sanctuary he offered, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that everything in her life had just changed. The golden warmth in her chest pulsed steadily, and for reasons she couldn't understand, she felt like she was finally walking toward home instead of away from it. She didn't know that the man beside her was an alpha king. She didn't know that he'd been searching for her his entire life, and she certainly didn't know that the golden thread connecting them was the rarest gift the moon goddess could bestow. But she was about to learn. The journey to his territory took 3 days. 3 days of walking beside a man whose name she still didn't know, whose presence made the golden thread in her chest hum with constant awareness. He moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to command, every step deliberate and confident. When he spoke, which wasn't often, his voice carried an authority that made her wolf sit up and pay attention in ways that should have terrified her. On the second morning, as they shared dried meat and water beside a stream, the truth finally came out. "You're him," Lyra whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "You're the Alpha King everyone whispers about." He went still, his dark eyes fixed on her face. Yes. The simple admission sent ice through her veins. She scrambled backward, putting distance between them even as the golden thread stretched painfully tight. "I can't. People like me don't belong anywhere near people like you." "Lyra." "No." She shook her head frantically. "Do you understand what I am? I'm packless, rejected, I'm nobody, and you're—" She gestured helplessly at him, this impossibly powerful man who could command armies with a single word. "You're everything I'm not." He moved slowly, carefully, the way someone might approach a wounded animal. "I understand that you're afraid." "Afraid?" A laugh escaped her, bitter and broken. "I'm terrified. Kings don't help girls like me unless they want something, and I have nothing left to give." "I don't want anything from you," he said quietly. "I want to give you something, safety, peace, a chance to heal." The golden thread pulsed with warmth, and she pressed her hand to her chest where it seemed to originate. "What is this feeling between us?" His expression shifted, something that looked almost like wonder crossing his features. "You feel it too." "It's impossible," she breathed. "Whatever this is, it's impossible." Sometimes the most impossible things are the most true. But fear won out over wonder, and she bolted. She made it perhaps 50 yards before the pain in her chest became unbearable. The golden thread stretched and burned, every step away from him feeling like she was tearing herself apart. She collapsed against a tree, gasping for air, her wolf whimpering in distress. He found her there minutes later, but he didn't approach. Instead, he sat down several feet away, his back against another tree, and waited. "I won't force you," he said after a long silence. "But running from this will only hurt us both." "Us?" The word came out strangled. "The bond doesn't lie, Lyra. Whatever this is between us, it's real, it's rare, and it's not something either of us can simply walk away from." She stared at him through tear-blurred eyes. "I don't understand." "Neither do I, completely, but I know that the moment I saw you in that clearing, everything in my world shifted. I know that when those rogues threatened you, my wolf nearly took control. And I know that the thought of letting you disappear into the night feels like losing half my soul." The raw honesty in his voice cracked something open inside her chest. "You don't even know me." "I know you're braver than you believe. I know you've been hurt badly, and you're still standing. I know you gather herbs in dangerous places because you'd rather risk your life than burden anyone else." He leaned forward slightly. "I know you're precious, even if no one has bothered to tell you that in a very long time." The words hit her like a physical blow. Precious. When was the last time anyone had called her precious? "Marcus said I was weak," she whispered. His eyes flashed with something dark and dangerous. Marcus was a fool. They finished the journey in careful silence, but the distance between them felt less fraught somehow. When his territory came into view on the third evening, Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The palace rose from the mountainside like something from a dream, all soaring towers and gleaming stone. Gardens cascaded down the terraces in waves of colour and light. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming, magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. "This is where you live?" she asked faintly. "This is home," he said simply. "Home." The word felt foreign on her tongue. She'd had a home once, before Marcus destroyed everything she'd believed about herself. Now she wore borrowed clothes and carried everything she owned in a canvas bag. I can't stay here," she said, panic rising in her throat. "Look at me! Look at this place! I don't belong here!" He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Do you trust me?" The question should have been easy to answer. She'd known him for 3 days. He was a king, and she was nothing. But the golden thread hummed with certainty, and her wolf had never been wrong about danger before. "I think so." "Then trust me when I tell you that you belong wherever you choose to be, and if you choose to stay, even for a little while, you'll be safe here, protected, valued." The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache with longing for things she'd stopped believing she could have. "What's your name?" she asked suddenly. He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his entire face. "Kieran." "Kieran," she repeated, and something warm unfurled in her chest at the sound of it. The rooms he gave her were larger than the entire cabin she'd grown up in. A massive 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in silks that probably cost more than she'd seen in her entire life. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens, and a fire crackled merrily in the marble fireplace. "I had clothing brought for you," Kieran said, gesturing to the wardrobe, "things that should actually fit." Lyra ran her fingers over the borrowed dress she wore, suddenly acutely aware of how shabby she must look. "Thank you. There's a bathing chamber through that door, and meals will be brought whenever you're hungry. You're not a prisoner here, Lyra. You're free to go wherever you like, do whatever you like." The kindness in his voice was almost harder to bear than cruelty would have been. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because I've been alone for longer than I care to remember. Because the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. and because everyone deserves to know what safety feels like. After he left, Lyra sank onto the impossibly soft bed and let herself cry. For the first time in months, they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of confusion and hope and terror, all tangled together. But underneath it all was a golden warmth that whispered, maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. That night, she dreamed of amber eyes and gentle hands, and a voice that called her precious. The days that followed were a strange rhythm of careful politeness and electric awareness. Kieran appeared at mealtimes, always asking how she was settling in, never pushing for more than she was willing to give. He showed her the gardens, the library, the healing centres where injured pack members came for treatment. "You could help here if you wanted," he said one afternoon as they watched a young wolf recover from a rogue attack. "Your knowledge of herbs, the way you understand trauma, they could use someone with your gifts." "My gifts?" Lyra looked at him in surprise. "I'm not gifted. I'm just surviving." "Survival is a gift," he said seriously. "So is the ability to heal others even while you're healing yourself. So is the strength to gather medicinal herbs in dangerous places because you know someone, somewhere, might need them." The way he saw her, the way he spoke about her as if she had value beyond her mistakes and failures, made something tight in her chest begin to loosen. On the 5th night, as they sat by the fire in his private study sharing tea and comfortable silence, she finally asked the question that had been burning in her throat. "Have you ever been mated before?" His hand stilled on his cup. "No." "But you must have had opportunities, choices." "Many," he agreed quietly. "None of them felt like a choice at all, until now." The golden thread pulsed between them, warm and insistent. "Kieran," she whispered, and she saw him close his eyes, as if the sound of his name on her lips affected him physically. "I know this is overwhelming," he said, without opening his eyes. "I know you have every reason not to trust what's happening between us, but I need you to know that I'm not Marcus. I see exactly how precious you are, and I would wait a lifetime for you to see it too." The confession hung in the air between them, weighted with promise and patience. When he finally looked at her again, she saw the same golden warmth in his eyes that she felt in her chest. Before she could think, before fear could stop her, she leaned forward and kissed him. The world exploded into heat and light and rightness. The golden thread blazed between them, and for the first time since Marcus had shattered her heart, Lyra felt whole. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of unexpected happiness. Lyra found herself settling into a rhythm she'd never imagined possible. Mornings in the healing centres, her hands gentle on wounded pack members who looked at her with gratitude instead of pity. Afternoons in the gardens with Kieran, their conversations flowing as easily as water over stones. Evenings by the fire, reading together in comfortable silence or sharing stories from their pasts. For the first time in her life, she felt useful, valued. The head healer, an elderly woman named Elena, had welcomed her knowledge of medicinal herbs with genuine enthusiasm. "You have a gift," Elena told her one afternoon as they prepared tinctures for a young mother struggling with anxiety. "The way you understand trauma, the gentleness in your touch. It's exactly what our people need. Our people." The words made something warm bloom in Lyra's chest. She was beginning to think of this place, these wolves, as home. But happiness, she'd learned, was a fragile thing. The delegation arrived on a Tuesday morning, their sense reaching her even before the guards announced their presence. Lyra was in the herb garden when the familiar smell hit her like a physical blow, making her stumble backward into the rose bushes. Marcus. Her former mate strode into Kieran's territory like he owned it, flanked by 2 other alphas she didn't recognise. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his clothes expensive, his bearing radiating the kind of arrogant confidence that had once made her heart race for all the wrong reasons. "Where is she?" His voice carried across the courtyard, sharp with authority and possession. Lyra's blood went cold. She pressed herself deeper into the garden, praying the roses would hide her, but it was too late. His amber eyes found hers across the space, and his smile was all predatory satisfaction. "There you are," he drawled, striding toward her with purposeful steps. "Did you really think you could hide from me forever?" "I'm not hiding," Lyra managed, though her voice shook. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Marcus laughed, the sound cruel and mocking. "Is that what you think? That you belong here in a palace, playing at being someone important?" He gestured dismissively at the healing centre behind them. "This is all very touching, but your little game is over. You're coming home." "This is my home now?" The words came out stronger than she felt. "Don't be ridiculous. You're mine by right of first claim, and I've come to collect what belongs to me." The possessive words made her skin crawl. "You rejected me, remember? Publicly, in front of your entire pack. You called me too weak to be an alpha's mate." "I was having doubts," Marcus said with a shrug that made her want to scream. "Pre-mating nerves, surely you can understand that. But I've reconsidered, and I'm willing to overlook your recent indiscretions." Indiscretions, as if finding safety and healing were crimes she'd committed against him. "I don't want you," Lyra said quietly. "I never want to see you again." His expression darkened. "What you want is irrelevant. You're mine, and I'm taking you back where you belong." That's when Kieran appeared. He moved with lethal grace, positioning himself between Marcus and Lyra without seeming to hurry. But the temperature in the garden dropped 10 degrees, and power rolled off him in waves that made even the other alphas step back. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Kieran said, his voice deceptively calm. Marcus straightened, clearly recognizing the authority in Kieran's bearing, even if he didn't yet understand its full scope. "And you are?" "Someone who's very interested in hearing you explain why you think you have any claim on this woman." "She's my mate," Marcus said, puffing up with false confidence, "bound to me by pack law and tradition." "Is she?" Kieran's eyes never left Marcus's face, but Lyra felt his attention like a warm blanket around her shoulders. "Because from where I stand, it looks like she's exactly where she chooses to be." "She doesn't get to choose," Marcus snapped. "She's mine by right, and I'm taking her back." The words hung in the air for a moment, and then Kieran smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Perhaps we should discuss this matter properly," he said with deadly politeness. "In front of my counsel, so there can be no misunderstanding about the legal complexities of your claim." Within an hour, the great hall was filled with Kieran's most trusted advisers. Lyra sat in a chair that had been placed near the throne, her hands twisted together in her lap as she tried to control her racing heart. The golden thread connecting her to Kieran hummed with protective warmth, but it wasn't enough to quiet her terror. Marcus stood before the assembly with his 2 alpha companions, his confidence apparently restored by the formal setting. He had no idea who he was truly facing. "State your claim," Kieran commanded from his throne, and the authority in his voice made every wolf in the room straighten. "The female belongs to my pack," Marcus announced. "She was promised to me, accepted my courtship, and was about to complete our mating bond when she fled like a coward. I've come to reclaim what's mine." Murmurs rippled through the assembled council members, but Kieran held up a hand for silence. "And you believe this gives you the right to take her from my territory?" "I believe pack law gives me that right, yes." Marcus's eyes gleamed with malicious triumph. "Unless you're planning to challenge centuries of tradition over one damaged female." Damaged. The word hit Lyra like a physical blow, and she saw several council members shift uncomfortably. "Damaged?" Kieran's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Of course," Marcus said with apparent relish. "Surely you've done your research. She's half Omega, a bloodline disgrace her mother managed to hide until it was too late. That's why I had second thoughts about the mating. That's why she ran instead of facing the shame of her mixed blood." The words fell into the silent hall like stones into still water. Lyra felt the weight of every gaze in the room, the judgment she'd been dreading since she'd arrived at Kieran's palace. Her secret was out, her shame exposed, and now everyone would see what Marcus had always seen, that she was fundamentally flawed, unworthy, wrong. There you have it, Marcus continued, his voice ringing with false sincerity. A half-breed who lied about her bloodline and seduced me under false pretences. Surely even you can see that she's not worthy of whatever protection you've offered her. Lyra closed her eyes, waiting for the inevitable rejection. Kieran had been kind to her, patient and gentle, but now that he knew what she really was, he would realize Marcus was right. She wasn't worthy of a place here. She wasn't worthy of the golden warmth in her chest, or the way he looked at her like she was precious, or the safety she'd foolishly allowed herself to believe in. She was already mentally preparing to leave when Kieran spoke. "You're absolutely right," he said quietly. Her heart shattered. But then he continued, and his words were nothing like what she'd expected. "She's not worthy of the protection I've offered her. She's worth so much more than that." Kieran rose from his throne, power radiating from every line of his body. "Her mixed bloodline doesn't make her flawed, you ignorant fool. It makes her perfect. Omega blood brings compassion, intuition, and healing gifts that pure alpha lines have lost. She's not damaged. She's evolved." The hall erupted in shocked murmurs, but Kieran wasn't finished. "You stand in my territory, before my council, and dare to call my mate damaged." His voice carried such authority that several of the visiting wolves dropped to their knees involuntarily. "You rejected the most precious gift the moon goddess could have given you, and now you have the audacity to demand her back?" "Your mate," the words echoed in Lyra's mind, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. Marcus had gone pale. "Your mate? Mine," Kieran confirmed, his eyes blazing with possessive fire. "Chosen, claimed, and cherished as she deserves to be. Your pathetic claim has no power here." "But the bloodline makes her queen's blood, not servant's blood," Kieran cut him off. "Omega heritage has always been revered among true leaders, not shunned by small-minded pretenders. You threw away a treasure because you were too ignorant to recognize its value." The conviction in his voice, the fierce protection radiating from every word, made tears burn behind Lyra's eyes. He wasn't rejecting her. He wasn't agreeing with Marcus's assessment. He was defending her with the full weight of his power and authority. "I demand satisfaction," Marcus sputtered, his face flushed with rage and humiliation. "Trial by combat for the right to claim her." "Denied," Kieran said flatly. "You have no standing to make such demands. Remove yourself from my territory before I decide you've committed treason by insulting my mate." The threat hung heavy in the air. Marcus and his companions exchanged worried glances, clearly beginning to understand the true scope of the power they'd challenged. "Who are you?" Marcus asked finally, his voice small with growing dread. Kieran's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'm the Alpha King, and you've just made the mistake of insulting my queen." The colour drained completely from Marcus's face. Around the hall, his alpha companions dropped to their knees, finally comprehending the magnitude of their error. "My king," Marcus stammered. "I didn't know." "Leave," Kieran commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of royal authority. "Take your ignorant prejudices and your pathetic pride and remove yourself from my sight. If you ever come near my mate again, I will consider it an act of war." They fled. In the silence that followed their departure, Kieran turned to face Lyra. The protective fury faded from his expression, replaced by something tender and achingly gentle. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She stared at him, this impossibly powerful man who had just defended her honour in front of his entire council, who had called her perfect instead of damaged, who had claimed her as his queen without hesitation. "You called me your mate," she whispered. "You are my mate," he said simply, "if you'll have me." The golden thread between them blazed with truth and promise and fierce, protective love. For the first time since Marcus had shattered her world, Lyra truly believed she might be worthy of something beautiful. "Yes," she breathed, "yes." When he kissed her in front of the entire assembly, the golden bond flared so bright that every wolf in the room could see it, a visible manifestation of the destiny that had brought them together. She was no longer packless, no longer damaged, no longer alone. She was home. The days that followed were a strange whirlwind of quiet healing and growing certainty. Lyra found herself walking through Kieran's territory with her head held higher, no longer flinching when pack members approached her. They looked at her differently now, not with pity or curiosity, but with respect. She was their future queen, the Alpha King's chosen mate, and slowly, carefully, she was beginning to believe it might actually be true. "I want to trust you," she told Kieran on the third evening after Marcus's humiliating departure. They were sitting in their usual spot by the fire, tea cooling in their hands as they watched the flames dance. "I want to try." The words felt like stepping off a cliff, but the way his eyes softened made her realize she was flying instead of falling. "That's all I need," he said quietly, "your willingness to try." The golden thread between them hummed with warmth and promise, and for the first time since Marcus had destroyed her faith in love, Lyra allowed herself to hope for a future she'd never dared imagine. That hope was put to the ultimate test 3 weeks later. The annual gathering of the Northern Packs was a tradition stretching back centuries, a time when unmated wolves from across the territories came together to find their fates. Kieran had asked if she wanted to attend as his guest, and though the idea terrified her, she'd agreed. She was tired of hiding, tired of letting fear make her decisions. The great ballroom had been transformed for the occasion, glittering with thousands of candles and draped in silks that caught the light like captured starlight. Wolves in their finest clothes moved across the polished floor in elaborate dances, their laughter and conversation filling the air with music and joy. Lyra stood at Kieran's side near the throne, wearing a gown that fit her perfectly and made her feel beautiful for the first time in her life. The deep emerald silk brought out the green in her eyes, and the way Kieran looked at her when she'd first appeared in it made her feel precious beyond measure. "You're radiant," he murmured, his hand warm and steady at the small of her back. She was beginning to believe him when Marcus appeared. He strode into the ballroom like an avenging angel, flanked by 4 alpha allies she recognized as some of the most traditional pack leaders in the Northern Territories. Their faces were set with grim determination, and the crowd parted before them like water before a blade. "I invoke the right of challenge," Marcus announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent ballroom. Lyra's blood turned to ice. The right of challenge was an ancient law, rarely invoked, but still legally binding. Any alpha could challenge another's claim to a mate if they could prove superior worthiness in the eyes of the moon goddess. Kieran's hand tightened protectively on her waist, but his voice remained steady. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that she was mine first, and you stole her through deception." Marcus's eyes glittered with malicious triumph. "You used your power and position to seduce a vulnerable female away from her rightful mate." Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd, and Lyra felt the weight of hundreds of stares. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, but too many looked speculative, as if they were wondering whether Marcus might be right. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, his voice rising with confidence, "I question whether she's truly worthy to stand as queen. She has no proper bloodline, no pack connections, no achievements worthy of such a position. She's damaged goods that you've dressed up in silk and presented as treasure." The words hit her like physical blows, each one designed to tear down the fragile confidence she'd been building. Lyra felt herself shrinking, the old patterns of shame and self-doubt rising like floodwater in her chest. I demand trial by combat, Marcus declared. Let the moon goddess decide who is truly worthy of her. The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Trial by combat was the most serious form of the right of challenge, reserved for disputes that threatened the very fabric of pack society. If Kieran accepted, one of them would die tonight. "Kieran, no," Lyra whispered, her hand clutching at his sleeve. "Please, I'm not worth dying for." The look he gave her was so fierce, so full of love and determination, that it took her breath away. "You're worth everything," he said simply. Then he turned back to Marcus, and his voice carried the full authority of his royal blood. "I accept your challenge." The crowd gasped, but Kieran wasn't finished. "However," he continued, his tone dropping to something deadly and precise, "since you've questioned not just my claim but my mate's worthiness to be queen, I propose we settle this matter completely. Let the entire assembly witness exactly who and what she is." He turned to face the crowd, his power radiating outward in waves that made every wolf in the room stand straighter. "You question her bloodline?" Kieran's voice rang across the ballroom like a bell. "Her Omega heritage brings gifts your pure alpha blood could never comprehend. Compassion that heals the wounded, intuition that sees truth through deception, strength that endures what would break lesser wolves." He gestured to where Lyra stood, frozen with shock and terror. "You question her achievements? In 3 weeks she's transformed my healing centres with her knowledge and gentleness. Wolves who had given up hope are walking again because of her care. Children who screamed at the sight of healers now laugh in her presence. She's brought light to dark places simply by existing." The crowd murmured, and Lyra saw several pack members nodding in recognition. They'd witnessed her work, seen the changes she'd brought to their territory. "You call her damaged?" Kieran's voice rose with righteous fury. "She survived your cruelty and came out kinder. She endured rejection and chose to keep healing others. She faced her deepest fears to be here tonight because she refuses to let cowards like you make her hide in shame." He stepped closer to Marcus, and the smaller alpha actually stumbled backward. "She is everything," Kieran declared, his words ringing with absolute conviction. "Everything I never knew I was searching for, everything this kingdom needs, everything the moon goddess intended when she blessed me with a mate worthy of standing at my side." The golden thread blazed between them, and Lyra gasped as she felt the full force of his love and faith crash over her like a tidal wave. He really meant it, every word. He truly saw her as precious, worthy, perfect, exactly as she was. "I am the Alpha King," Kieran continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "I have searched for my mate for 32 years, and I would rather spend eternity alone than settle for anything less than the perfection the goddess intended. She is mine, chosen by fate and claimed by choice, and I will defend her worth with my life if necessary." He turned back to Marcus, and his smile was sharp as a blade. "But it won't be necessary, because you're going to withdraw your challenge, apologise for insulting my queen, and remove yourself from my territory before I decide that your continued existence is a threat to her peace of mind." The power radiating from Kieran was overwhelming, primal, the kind of authority that bent necks and broke wills. Around the ballroom, wolves began dropping to one knee in recognition of their king's dominance. Marcus tried to hold his ground, but his alpha companions had already begun backing away. Without their support, facing the full weight of royal displeasure, he crumbled. I withdraw my challenge," he stammered, his face pale with terror. "Louder," Kieran commanded. "I withdraw my challenge." Marcus's voice cracked with fear and humiliation. "I apologise for insulting your queen." "Her name," Kieran said with deadly calm. "I apologise for insulting Queen Lyra." The title hung in the air like a coronation itself. Queen Lyra. The sound of it made something bright and fierce bloom in her chest. "Leave," Kieran said simply, "all of you, and spread the word to any who might be confused about my mate's worth. She is my queen, chosen by the moon goddess herself, and anyone who questions her place at my side questions me." Marcus and his allies fled without another word. In the silence that followed, Kieran turned to face Lyra, and the transformation in his expression from deadly king to gentle mate made her heart stutter. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She stared at him. This incredible man who had just defended her honour before hundreds of witnesses, who had called her everything and queen, and perfect without a moment's hesitation. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did." He stepped closer, his hands gentle as he cupped her face. "Because you are my mate, my queen, and my heart. Because you deserve to be defended and cherished and celebrated. Because I love you beyond reason or measure." The words hit her like lightning, electric and perfect and absolutely true. The golden thread between them flared so bright that gasps rose from the watching crowd. "I love you too," she breathed, the admission feeling like coming home. When he kissed her in front of the entire assembly, the bond between them blazed visible and golden, marking them as true mates for all to see. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, celebrating the love they'd just witnessed, the queen they'd just gained. As Kieran held her against his chest, Lyra marvelled at how completely her world had changed. Months ago she'd been broken and packless, believing herself worthless and unwanted. Now she was loved, defended, claimed. Now she was queen. And for the first time in her life, she believed she deserved it all. The days that followed were a symphony of healing and love. Lyra woke each morning in Kieran's arms, the golden bond between them humming with contentment and joy. The fear that had lived in her chest for so long had been replaced by something she'd never dared hope for, absolute certainty that she was loved, cherished and home. Her work in the healing centres had evolved into something magnificent. Word of the Alpha King's mate and her extraordinary gifts had spread throughout the Northern Territories, and wolves travelled for days to seek her help. She treated them all with the same gentle compassion, whether they were powerful alphas or humble omegas seeking relief from trauma. "You have a gift," Elena told her one morning as they prepared healing salves together. "Not just with herbs, but with hearts. You understand pain in a way that lets others trust you with theirs." Lyra smiled, her hands steady as she ground lavender and chamomile. "I understand what it feels like to be broken. It makes it easier to see how the pieces fit back together." Her mixed bloodline, once a source of shame, had become her greatest strength. The intuitive healing abilities that came from her Omega heritage, combined with the protective instincts of her Alpha blood, created something entirely new. She could sense emotional wounds as clearly as physical ones, knowing exactly what each patient needed to begin healing. Kieran often found her in the evenings, exhausted but glowing with purpose, and would pull her into his arms with fierce pride. "My queen," he would murmur against her hair, "look what you've built. Look how you've changed lives simply by being yourself." The transformation wasn't just in her work. It was in how the pack saw her, accepted her, loved her. Children ran to her in the corridors, knowing she always had time for scraped knees and hurt feelings. Adults sought her counsel on everything, from family disputes to matters of the heart. She'd become the emotional centre of the kingdom without even realising it. "Are you happy?" Kieran asked one evening as they walked through the moonlit gardens. 3 months had passed since the night Marcus had challenged their bond, and the question had become a ritual between them. "I didn't know I could feel this safe," she admitted, her hand warm in his. "This loved. For so long I thought I was broken beyond repair." "You were never broken," he said, stopping to face her among the blooming roses. "You were healing, even when you didn't know it. Every day you survived Marcus's cruelty, every night you chose to keep going despite the pain. You were healing yourself so you could heal others." The truth of his words settled deep in her bones. She had been healing slowly and surely, building the strength she'd needed to love and be loved in return. "I have something for you," Kieran said, his voice soft with nervous excitement. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Inside was the most beautiful ring she'd ever seen. A moonstone surrounded by delicate golden vines, the entire piece carved with intricate symbols that seemed to glow in the starlight. "It's the traditional Queen's ring," he explained, his hands slightly unsteady as he lifted it from the box. "But I had it remade for you. The moonstone represents the goddess's blessing on our bond. The golden vines are our connection, growing stronger every day. And these symbols—" he traced the delicate carvings with his finger. "They tell the story of a broken wolf who became a queen, of healing that turned to love, of two souls who found their home in each other." Tears blurred her vision as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the weight of it both foreign and absolutely right. "Will you marry me?" he asked, though they both knew the answer. "Will you be my queen, my mate, my heart for all the days of our lives?" "Yes," she whispered, the word carrying all the love and certainty in her soul. "Forever, yes." The formal ceremony took place 6 months later, on the anniversary of the night they'd first met in the moonlit clearing. The entire kingdom had come to celebrate, along with representatives from every major pack in the Northern Territories. Even wolves who'd once questioned her worthiness now looked at her with genuine respect and affection. Lyra stood before the ancient altar, wearing a gown that made her feel like starlight given form. The ivory silk flowed around her like water, embroidered with golden thread that caught the light with every breath. Her hair was crowned with a circlet of moonstones, and the queen's ring on her finger blazed with inner fire. But it was Kieran's face that made her feel truly beautiful. The way he looked at her as she walked down the aisle, with wonder and love and fierce protectiveness, reminded her that she was precious beyond measure. "You taught me that patience can heal what force never could," he said during his vows, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed hall. "You showed me that true strength isn't about power over others, but about the courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to love despite the risk of pain. You are my heart, my soul, my perfect match, and I will spend every day of our lives proving that you were worth the wait." Her own vows came from the deepest part of her heart. "You saw worth in me when I couldn't see it in myself. You defended me when I couldn't defend myself. You waited for me to heal when I didn't know I could. You gave me safety, love, and a home I never dreamed I could have. I promise to love you with the same patience and gentleness you showed me, to stand at your side as your queen and your mate, and to build a kingdom where every broken soul can find healing." When the priestess declared them formally mated before the moon goddess, the golden bond between them flared so bright that gasps rose from the assembly. It was visible to everyone now, a shimmering thread of pure love connecting their hearts. The celebration lasted 3 days, but Lyra's favourite moment came on the second night, when they snuck away from the festivities to return to their private chambers. She was curled against Kieran's chest, still wearing her wedding gown, but with her hair loose around her shoulders, when he asked the question that had become their touchstone. "Are you happy?" She lifted her head to meet his eyes, seeing her own joy reflected in their depths. "I didn't know it was possible to feel this complete, this whole. For most of my life I felt like I was missing pieces of myself. But with you—" She traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "With you, I'm exactly who I was meant to be." "So am I," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I searched for 32 years for something I couldn't even name. Now I know I was searching for you. For this. For the feeling of being understood completely by someone who loves me not despite my flaws, but including them." They talked late into the night about their dreams for the kingdom, for the family they hoped to build, for the healing centres Lyra wanted to expand to every territory. They talked about the children who would grow up knowing that love was patient, that worth wasn't earned but inherent, that home was wherever your heart felt safe. "What do you think our children will be like?" Lyra asked sleepily as dawn approached. Kieran's arms tightened around her, his voice warm with wonder. Strong like their mother, gentle like their mother, perfect like their mother. And stubborn like their father, she added with a laugh, patient like their father, noble like their father. They'll be lucky, he said seriously, to grow up in a kingdom where their queen understands healing, where their king knows the value of gentleness, where love is the strongest law. As sleep finally claimed them, Lyra marvelled at the journey that had brought her here. From a broken packless wolf hiding in the shadows to a queen beloved by her people, from someone who believed she was worthless to someone who knew she was everything. The golden thread hummed between them, steady and warm and eternal. She was no longer afraid of the future, because she knew with absolute certainty that whatever came, they would face it together. She was healed, she was loved, she was home, and in the morning, when she woke to find Kieran watching her with eyes full of adoration, when she saw the kingdom spreading out beneath their window, full of wolves who looked to her for guidance and comfort, when she felt the new life growing in her womb that would carry on their legacy of love, she knew that fairy tales could come true, even for girls who started broken, especially for girls who started broken. 1 year later, Lyra stood in the same moonlit clearing where her life had changed forever. The forest was exactly as she remembered it, silver leaves catching starlight, the scent of earth, and growing things heavy in the air. But everything else had transformed beyond recognition. She was no longer the broken, packless wolf who had gathered herbs in desperation. Now she wore a simple but elegant gown, her hair crowned with the circlet that marked her as queen, her hand resting protectively over the gentle curve of her growing belly. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The question had become a ritual between them, asked and answered countless times over the months of their marriage. Kieran's arms came around her from behind, his hands covering hers where they rested on their unborn child. "Staying," he murmured against her ear. "Every day I thank the moon goddess you were brave enough to trust me." The golden thread between them hummed with perfect contentment. Their bond had only grown stronger with time, deepened by shared purpose and unwavering love. What had started as an impossible pull between strangers had become the foundation of a kingdom transformed. "I was thinking about that night," Lyra said softly, leaning back against his chest. "How terrified I was, how certain I was that I didn't deserve safety, let alone love." "You deserved everything," Kieran replied firmly. "You always did. I'm just grateful I was the one who got to prove it to you." The healing centres they'd built together had become the pride of the kingdom, drawing wolves from across the continent seeking treatment for trauma, abuse, and broken bonds. Under Lyra's guidance, they'd developed revolutionary approaches to emotional healing, combining traditional medicine with the intuitive gifts that came from her mixed bloodline. Just last week, a young female wolf had arrived at their gates, packless, terrified, convinced she was worthless because her mate had rejected her. Lyra had seen herself in those frightened eyes and had offered the same patient kindness Kieran had shown her. "You're safe now," she'd told the trembling girl, "and when you're ready, if you're ready, we'll help you find your strength again." It was the same promise Kieran had made to her in this very clearing, and watching that young wolf begin to heal had felt like completing a sacred circle. "She reminds me of someone," Kieran had said that evening, watching Lyra work with their newest patient. "All broken things can be made whole again," Lyra had replied, unconsciously echoing the wisdom she'd learned through her own healing. "They just need someone patient enough to wait while they learn to trust." Now, standing in their place of beginning, she marvelled at how far they'd both come. The kingdom flourished under their joint leadership, Kieran's strength and authority balanced by her compassion and healing gifts. They'd created something unprecedented, a realm where power served love instead of the other way around. "The baby will be here soon," Kieran said, his voice full of wonder as he felt their child move beneath his palm. "Are you ready to be a father?" Lyra asked, turning in his arms to face him. His smile was radiant. I'm ready to teach our child everything you've taught me. That love is patient, that healing takes time, that worth isn't something you earn, it's something you are, simply by existing." "And what will you teach them?" she asked, though she already knew. "That strength comes in many forms, that protecting others is the highest purpose, that sometimes the greatest courage is in choosing to trust when everything tells you to run." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moon paint silver patterns through the canopy above. This clearing would always be sacred to them, the place where two broken souls had recognized their perfect match, where fear had been overcome by love, where destiny had finally found its way home. "I love you beyond measure," Kieran said quietly, the words he'd spoken on their wedding night still carrying the same weight, the same truth. "You saved me too, you know," Lyra replied, echoing her response from that perfect evening. "From a life of believing I was broken beyond repair, you showed me that some things only appear broken because they're becoming something better." As they walked back through the forest toward their palace, Lyra felt the golden thread between them pulse with quiet joy. Their kingdom slept peacefully around them, protected by their love and guided by their shared commitment to healing. Children would grow up knowing that gentleness was strength, that patience could heal any wound, that love was always worth the wait. The healing centres would continue to grow, spreading their revolutionary approaches to every corner of the realm. Broken wolves would find sanctuary and slowly learn to trust again. Mates would discover that true bonds were built on respect and patience rather than dominance and possession. Their own children would grow up in a palace filled with laughter and safety, where their mixed heritage was celebrated as a gift rather than hidden as a shame. They would learn from their mother that being different made you special, not flawed, and from their father that real power was only ever used to protect and serve others. When they reached the palace gates, Kieran paused to look back at the forest where their story had begun. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For being brave enough to say yes when everything told you to run, for trusting me with your heart when you had every reason to guard it, for building something beautiful from the broken pieces of our pasts." Lyra rose on her toes to kiss him gently, the golden bond flaring bright between them. "Thank you for waiting, for seeing worth in me when I couldn't see it myself, for proving that fairy tales can come true, even for girls who start broken." "Especially for girls who start broken," he corrected with a smile. As they walked through the halls of their home, past portraits of their wedding day and windows overlooking the thriving kingdom beyond, Lyra thought about the young wolves who would arrive at their gates tomorrow seeking healing. She thought about the children who would grow up knowing they were precious simply for existing. She thought about the love stories she and Kieran were still writing, one patient day at a time. The golden thread hummed with eternal warmth, connecting not just their hearts, but their purpose, their dreams, their unshakable faith in the power of love to transform even the most broken things into something magnificent. She was no longer the terrified wolf gathering herbs in the darkness. She was queen, healer, mate, and soon to be mother. She was exactly who she was meant to be, standing exactly where she belonged, with exactly the person she was destined to love. And in the morning, when she woke in Kieran's arms with sunlight streaming through their windows and their child stirring gently in her womb, she would know with absolute certainty that some endings are really just the most beautiful beginnings. Where are you listening from? I love hearing your thoughts in the comments below. Each story touches us differently, and I'm always amazed by the connections we find in these tales of healing and hope. If you'd like to support me and hear more stories like this, please subscribe. It's free and it helps more people discover these tales of love conquering fear, of patience healing wounds, and of broken hearts finding their perfect home.